Hello, my name is Michael Fakhri, and I am the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. This means I'm an independent expert for the UN system. I'm the eyes, ears, and good conscience for the UN on all matters regarding hunger, famine, and malnutrition from a human rights perspective. I apologize that I couldn't participate live with you, but this is because of the significant time difference. I want to start by congratulating all of you for your hard work and dedication. For me, what brings about change is not this particular law or that particular law. Of course, laws and constitutions matter, but what brings about real change is people's ability to organize themselves and work together. And the Root to Food Alliance is an example of that kind of power that can bring about meaningful and long-lasting change. What I'm going to do is I'll start with what problems we're all facing globally in regards to hunger and how our food systems operate. And then I'll provide some suggestions for the way forward. So let me start with what's wrong. We are in the midst of a global food crisis, and this was first triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. So in very general terms, the rate of hunger and malnutrition has been on the rise since 2015. The pandemic made existing problems worse because of lockdowns, because workers' health and safety was not adequately addressed, because migrant workers and rural communities were dehumanized. We had so-called supply chain disruptions. Because people could not go to work, could not go to shops, could not visit each other, people could not access food. No country, rich or poor, has escaped the food crisis. Now that the pandemic has formally ended, the food crisis is actually worse. This is because during the pandemic, most governments implemented programs to ensure people had access to good food. But now that the pandemic has ended, they've ended these programs, which has made the rates of hunger skyrocket. These programs that proved to work were things like providing school children meals throughout the year, not just during the academic year, and providing meals to all children, regardless of their background and income. Other programs that worked during the pandemic was when the government provided direct cash payments to people, and people proved to use those payments to provide the necessities of life. However, the problems in our food system are long-standing. They're structural problems. Hunger and famine are never caused, never result of not having enough food. For the past 60 years, we've always had more than enough food to feed everybody on the planet, and then some. Hunger and famine are always the result of political failures. So hunger is inherently a political problem, a question of power and institutions, not a production problem. The problem is that over the past decades, more and more power has been concentrated in the hands of the few. And this is done through corporations. The problem with allowing corporations to dominate food systems is that corporations are designed to be primarily focused on generating profit and shielding investors from risk and liability. Because corporations are so focused on profit, they treat food systems like factories, a system of inputs and outputs. As a result, industrial food systems generate 1/3 of the world's greenhouse gases and are reducing biodiversity. But food systems, after all, are social and ecological relationships. Life is based on circular relationships, on cooperation and reciprocity, not just competition. The measure of a healthy food system is not production output as such. Yes, we must ensure that we produce enough food to feed everyone, but we can't do this by robbing future generations of a healthy environment. I think the way forward is by using the right to food. Human rights are about relationships. More specifically, human rights focus on the relationships between governments and people. That relationship is key to getting us through this food crisis. In the end, a government is only as strong as its people. The other relationship that is important is people's relationship to the environment. People are only as strong as the biosphere. The purpose of human rights is to ensure that every aspect of society, every sector of the economy works to serve and empower those relationships, the government and the people and the environment. The key to human rights and the right to food specifically is that people are at the center of it all, not profits or geopolitics. This is why many people find holistic approaches like agroecology the way forward to fulfill the right to food and human rights. Agroecology is not only about ensuring we regenerate our soil and increase biodiversity. Agroecology also recognizes that you cannot separate how you treat the land from how you treat people. The right to food is the right to be free from hunger. It's the right for everyone to celebrate life through their meals with each other in communion. Food is a key way that people define their very understanding of community. Food is also central to how people establish their relationship with the land and with water. So with this in mind, you can see how food is a core aspect of how people express and define their sovereignty. The right to food means that everyone is entitled for their food to always be adequate, available, and accessible. And I'll explain what those three concepts mean. So for food to be adequate, it means that people must have good food, and they have the right to define and determine what is good food for them. People must decide for themselves what is culturally, nutritionally, socially, and ecologically appropriate food based on their particular conditions. And the key value here is dignity. Second, food must be available. That means that people must have a reliable source of food. This can either be directly feeding oneself by working the land or having access to the land and water, but it's also about ensuring that food is available in shops and markets. The key value here is fairness. People's access to natural resources must be equitable, and markets should be fair markets. And third, food must be accessible. Governments must ensure that everyone can access food. This can be through economic access, meaning that people must be able to get a good meal through fair markets, but it also might be through free school meals or through a social system that allows people to have a fair wage and the time to cook a good meal for their family and their communities. And food must also be physically accessible. That means that governments must ensure that food systems and institutions are universally inclusive, regardless of a person's physical ability, legal status, health, their state of their health. So in sum, the right to food is about good relations between the government and the people based on accountability and dignity, and good food needs to make people stronger and the land more resilient. I'll conclude with a question that was asked with suggestions with what role you can play as an alliance to advocate for the realization of the human right to food. And I think there's two things you can do. First, I think it's important to explain to governments that the right to food works in their favor, that the government should not be afraid of human rights, and it actually makes the government stronger by establishing a good relationship with people. Second, I think it's important to think about what new relationships you need to foster and develop. Change happens by changing existing relationships or creating new ones. So ask yourselves, what are the conflicts amongst people within the food systems in Kenya? What can be done to develop solidarity across different constituents in food systems? In the end, you'll know best what campaigns to take up, but what matters most is that you organize around those campaigns. What matters most is that you create new relationships of solidarity and friendship from those campaigns. Remember, food is also about hospitality, and so the politics around food must be generous and inviting. With this, I wish you good luck and hope to meet some of you in person in the near future.